Hello, I am your talk host on syndicated radio, Pacifica Network. I am Dawn Westmoreland. My show is called The Resilience Realm, and it airs Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone and at different other times when another Pacifica radio station picks it up. So, welcome. The show is about resilience, courage, healing, and more. And today, I am going to share some tips about how to document. And why am I the best person to talk about documentation? Well, for one thing, I've been an HR person for 33 years and it's required good documentation. I remembered being in the Air Force and we had our training in personnel, which is the same as HR, it's just different experience of HR in the Air Force. And I remember how important it was during our training, it was emphasized about documenting. So I have had to document over the years. I've taught other people how to document, whether they're employees or employers. And I'm best at telling people how to document workplace bullying and discrimination. So the tips that I share today, mind you, if it does not apply to you, if you're not working, it might apply to somebody else. Or you can even use the same skills, like if your child's being harassed in the workplace, or I'm sorry, in the schoolroom. Workplace on the brain here. Well, what do you expect from an HR person, right? So one of the first things that I'm going to talk about is the importance of properly documenting workplace issues, bullying, and discrimination. And then I will go to how to document an incident of bullying or discrimination. Next, I will also tell you how to send a clarification email to HR, Human Resources, your manager or your supervisor. And then I'll give you some samples, some ideas how to send to HR, your manager, and supervisor. And also, how long should you wait for responses on emails to HR, Human Resources, your manager, supervisor? So I like to start out first with Daniel Ellsberg, and he was employed by Rand Corporation. He triggered a national political controversy when he released the Pentagon Papers, which were a top secret study of U.S. government decisions about the Vietnam War, to the New York Times and other newspapers. Ellsberg was charged under the Espionage Act of 1917, along with additional charges of theft and conspiracy. He faced a maximum sentence of up to 115 years, and all the charges were dismissed due to government misconduct and illegal evidence gathering. In 2018, Ellsberg received the Olof Palme Prize for his profound humanism and exceptional moral courage. In a recent article, the CIA, they leaked to the WikiLeaks, and the name of the game is documents. So why is documenting so very important? If you are an employee and you're going through some kind of harassment, you need to document it. And you need to know the difference between bullying and discrimination. So bullying is not illegal in the workplace, and bullying can be as simple as somebody doesn't tell you that there's a meeting in an hour and you get in trouble. That's an example of bullying. There's many, many, many examples. Discrimination, well, that could be age, sex, could fall into LGBTQIA. It could be pregnancy, religion, genetics. There's quite a few, and you can find them all at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission webpage, which is eeoc.gov. Why is it important to document? Well, let's say you had a meeting with a human resource manager, or you had a meeting with an employee who's not living up to standards. You can talk to them and communicate back and forth, but if it's not documented, and you have to go forward with raising your voice about something, speaking up about it. You might have to go to an employment attorney if you feel there's disability discrimination. You got to have your documentation really tight. Now, one thing I noticed over the years, and it's only because people do not know how to document, that they do it wrong. And so I'm going to get into some tips about documenting what's going on. Now, mind you, whether it's an employee, employer, it works the same way. You're basically documenting the facts. You're being objective with the dates, the instances. You're not being subjective. You're not writing, I feel, it's not about feeling. It's like, what did the person do wrong? Did they bully you? Are they bullying in the workplace and you're the leader of a company or something like that? It's really important to document, because if you do not document, you have nothing. What do you have to prove if you have to move forward to show that you were harassed or bullied? So, witnesses are often afraid of retaliation for defending you or sharing the details of what they saw in the workplace. So that's why I'm going to talk about it. A lot of times you think that, oh my gosh, there's witnesses that saw the bullying or the discrimination happening, whether it's on an employee or employer, it doesn't matter. I've worked on both sides, and I've seen employees that have been discriminated. I've seen, people who want to have a more friendlier DEI work environment where everybody is inclusive and feel like they belong. So I have a checklist for documenting workplace bullying or discrimination. So you want to ensure that you use email to communicate and create an email trail when you have concerns about being mistreated in the workplace. Now, if you don't know if it's bullying or discrimination, I highly encourage you to talk to a professional. That could be an employment attorney. It could be, a consultant or some. Make sure that you understand what's discrimination and what's bullying. And again, I'll refer you back to the EEOC.gov, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Now, they also have states, every state has like their version of the EEOC too. And sometimes it is faster to process discrimination issues through that. So the second thing is you want to ensure that you write brief and objective emails, as I said, when you discuss your concerns or ask for clarification on past communications. And the third, you want to ensure that you print and keep a copy of your email in a safe place outside of work. Why do you do that? I want to hit on those. I mean, the first ones to me are kind of common sense, and I hope they are to you too. A lot of people write long, drawn out documentation. Well, this hurt my feelings, so on, so on, so on. And it probably did, but that's not what you put in your documentation. That is what stays out of the documentation, because nobody wants to read a whole bunch of garbage. And I say garbage, I'm not talking about people's feelings, but they don't want to read long documentation. Get right to the point, be accurate. So why do you print it at the workplace? This blows people's minds. First of all, when you're on a computer, and let's say you're an employee, for example, and you see something going wrong and you're documenting, you're writing it up, and boom, you're emailing it to your home computer or to friends or whoever. First of all, it's not your computer if you work for somebody else. It's their computer. They have the rights to manage and monitor that computer. And oftentimes, if there is something that is going on that's illegal, unjust, or discriminatory, or whatever, I have a saying, you never want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing. And if you're not familiar with that term, it just means it's best to keep it private, keep it to yourself, print it in the workplace. Why? Because if you email at home or somewhere else and somebody is monitoring that computer or all the computers at the workplace, then you've already let that person know. Maybe it's the IT people, maybe it's the manager of a company. You've let them know that you're documenting, and they may instantly fire you before you even have an opportunity to present the evidence. So I'm a big believer, firm believer in print it out, lock it up, don't keep it at work, take it home, put it in a binder, make it chronological, and it's that easy. Always print it out, even if you have to crumple it and stick it in your back pocket, because you can always take it somewhere and unfold it and make another copy of it. So when I talk about clarifying emails, I'm going to get into that. Clarifying is asking for more information. Let's say you are an employee and you're, for example, you're pregnant, you're female, you're pregnant, and you need American Disability Act. You're having issues with your pregnancy. And that's often common for most women, or even it also involves adopting children. That's one thing you can't be discriminated against. So if your doctor puts you on light duty, the supervisor has to comply for the most part. Now, I'm not going to give legal advice. I'm not an employment attorney. I'm an HR technician, HR professional. And I'm speaking as an HR professional. I will always refer everyone to an employment attorney when it comes to law. But if there's issues where you feel that you're not being accommodated with American Disability Act, where maybe you have to work less hours, or you might have to have more time to go and have medical appointments, or you have complications before or after the pregnancy, a supervisor has a responsibility to abide by the American Disability Act. Now, there's always when I say complications, I don't mean complications. It's not a free all. Every time a doctor writes a note, it's going to be approved. If it becomes a hardship for the supervisor, the manager, where they cannot do their job, then they might not be able to provide that American Disability Act reasonable accommodation, we call it in HR. And that could be because, I'll give you a good example. If your job as an employee is traveling a lot, okay, and you can't travel a lot. And then after you come out of your, having your pregnancy, your time off and such, maybe you've invoked the Family Medical Leave Act, which is 12 weeks a year. Then you go back to work, but you've got to be able to do the work and you have to be able to meet the standards. But you still can ask for a reasonable accommodation. Maybe you need to elevate your legs, maybe you need an ergonomic chair or keyboard or such. So when I talk about documenting, these are examples. So you were coming back off of maternity leave. And this happens to some women. I've never had children, but I've seen it myself, that postpartum depression. I remember being in the Air Force and a coworker, and I was in 20 years, I'm retired from the Air Force. She came back to work and she just had the worst time. I mean, she had deep, deep depression and was having a hard time dealing with it. It was documented. The medical notes came in. So she was allowed to have more time off so that she could get her help, her medical help that she needed, psychological help. And that worked out just perfectly. But how do you do it? Well, you have to send an email. Here's a mistake that a lot of people make. And I'm talking about everyone. We've all made this mistake. I've even made this mistake. Is, for example, you're bringing in medical documentation. Let's say you need a reasonable accommodation. Maybe you have a mental health issue and you need to work in a quieter area so you're not so freaked out by all the stimulation of the lights or the noise. And you can work in a quieter area and you can have your doctor write that. And so your doctor writes the letter, you submit it to HR or whoever handles your American Disability Act information. It's often the HR, but it could be your manager if it's a small company. So would you just hand over that documentation, the medical records? Here you go. Here you go. Here's my doctor's note. Well, the answer is no, absolutely not. Because if you do, you've made one of the biggest mistakes ever. Now, I like to think that most people are good, and they are, but we're human. I make mistakes and other people make mistakes too. What if that paperwork got lost? And then what if that person wasn't honest? And we hope that they are honest and they don't turn it in or something's missing in it. Well, what I've always suggested is email the documentation. And I always get this, oh, we're not allowed to email. Company policy, we're not allowed to email. Well, that's absolutely nonsense because you are allowed to provide documentation by email to show that it was sent to whoever it is, whether it's HR, whether it's the manager. And that's why it's so important. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they hand over documentation or they have a meeting with no follow-up email clarifying, what was spoken at the meeting and such. So really, really, really important. Do not just hand over major paperwork. It's one thing when it's something that's not, a real big deal, but it's another thing when it's something so important that it can impact your job, it can impact your life. So sometimes what I will do is, as I said, I'll put everything in a binder and I'll have dividers to separate the documentation into categories. And then I'll have, a table of contents, emails, medical records, and documentation. So the number 2 one, dividers to separate your documentation into categories. Why would you do that? Well, let's say that you're going through depression because you're being mistreated at the workplace, whether it's bullying or discrimination. And let's say, for example, you're seeing a counselor, a professional counselor. Well, that counselor can be of great aid, not only for your mental health and well-being, but they can also document and tie into the workplace what you're experiencing. And that's where other people make mistakes because they don't go back and look at the medical records. And I'm just going to say, let's say you're going to some kind of mental health counselor, and I'm a huge advocate for mental health, and I have my own counselor because I carry a lot on my plate as a caregiver for a mother who's almost 85 and trying to work and trying to be on boards and trying to be a syndicated radio talk host as a volunteer. So I carry a lot of weight, and it can stress me out. So counseling is really good. So let's say you go to a counselor and the counselor's documenting, I'm just going to make this name up, Susie Bobby, is stressed out, so on, so on. And then it doesn't tie into the workplace. Well, then that paperwork may not be suitable to turn over to an employment attorney. Again, I'm coming at you as an HR professional, not as an employment attorney. You want to have credible evidence. So, for example, what I have suggested to people as an HR expert is to tell your doctor, tell your medical folks, mental health counselor, and make sure that it is somebody qualified to diagnose you. They can write up that Susie Bobby is experiencing workplace harassment, workplace discrimination. Do you see where I'm going with it? That they're stressed out because they're not getting their American Disability Act reasonable accommodation. And for example, they believe that it was reasonable, it wasn't a hardship to the company. Do you get where I'm going with this? It's so very, very important that if you're going to have documentation for your mental health records, that it's somebody that can actually, qualifies that can diagnose you. Not every counselor can diagnose you. They can talk to you. They're great help and they're wonderful. It might be a psychologist or psychiatrist that has to say, Susie Bobby is going through workplace bullying, because they can legally, they're authorized to diagnose you. Then you would turn around and then take that documentation, either to your home, you can email from your home, or if you have the ability to scan it, email it from your work computer to whoever gets that. That could be your HR person. Again, it could be whoever handles the American Disability Act. So I'm going to give you a real simple email. Let's say somebody's discriminating against you. Okay, I am making these names up. So you could say, Dear Sally, you made, and you're emailing this to Sally, you're emailing a remark about my sexuality this afternoon. You made the following remarks, and then you would put the remarks, and do not ever lie or exaggerate. Just tell the facts. Be honest. I request that you immediately stop making offensive and derogatory remarks about me. I have the right to work in an environment that is free of discrimination, and your behavior is affecting my health and well-being. Why did I put that? And that is if it applies. Sometimes it doesn't apply. We're all unique. What would offend me today? It takes a lot to offend me today. And that's because I'm older and wiser. But some people, just somebody looking at them the wrong way offends them. So you would go ahead and send out an email to that person. Hopefully she will knock it off, stop, or say, I'm sorry, and then it's no more. But I would still print it off and then take it home in case you need it. Do not email it home. Let's say that the bullying or discrimination continues, okay? Now you have proof on whatever day you wrote this email to, I'm just going to make the names up, to the HR person, Sarah. Now you have an email documentation proof. When you go to HR, go to your manager. Hey, on this day, I did reach out. I did reach out to a person who I felt was making discriminatory remarks about me, about my age, about my sex, about my religion. They're all on the eeoc.gov website, all the discrimination classes. That's proof that you reached out and you addressed it head on. Why does it matter? Well, it starts the fundamental basic foundation. You're building the foundation of documenting, because if it continues, then you can keep doing those emails. You can email the HR and let them know that it's continuing. So for example, here's another one. Here's another good example. Okay, the names are made up. Dear Mrs. Smith or Mr. Taylor, I am having a bullying or a discriminatory problem with Sally or Tom. And again, names made up. I have addressed the matter with him or her on, remember you got that email on the date it happened. The problem has intensified, and I'm bringing it to your awareness and asking for your support. The following occurred, keep it brief, whatever happened. I am attaching a copy of the email I sent Sally or Tom for your review and action. I would like to meet with you to discuss the matter further. Thank you, respectively. And whoever your name is, put your name. Okay. So give that person, if it's a manager, supervisor, HR, and they're at work, and they're not on vacation or on leave or sick leave or anything like that, give them at least, a couple days. Okay. Try to be patient. Don't expect immediate answers within an hour. Sometimes that, if they have the time, they can. But remember, supervisors and managers are also very busy doing other things. So when you have that meeting, and let's say you have a meeting with HR and they're like, okay, it won't stop. Sally, Bobby, whoever is still bullying me, still discriminating against me. Well, now you have all your documentation. And then whatever the HR person says, for example, if they say, well, I'll address it, I'll have an investigation, whatever it is, then that's when you go back, and you don't have to do it right away, but I would do it really within 24 hours, within a business day. Send back what I call a clarifying email. And what is that? Okay, it clarifies, it summarizes the meeting you had with that HR person or with the manager, for example. So here's an example. Dear Ms. Smith or Mr. Taylor, for clarification purposes, I want to ensure I understand you correctly. Earlier today, you discussed the option of me moving to a new department so I do not have to work with or around whatever that person's name is. I had discussed with you that I was being harassed by that person, and the following occurred. Keep it brief. All you're doing is summarize. Do not word for word. I've had people ask me, should they ever secretly record their meeting? All I know is every state is different, but I always encourage you to find a legal resource to find out, because every state's different. I know in North Carolina, and again, I don't practice law, but if you go to law sites, you'll official law sites, you'll see a lot of mention on, who can record. If only one person agrees that you can record, and that can be yourself, but always check a professional legal service. Be sure that you do not record somebody that if you're not supposed to be recording, because boy, oh boy, you can get in so much trouble. And to continue on, again, wait a couple of days. Give them a little bit of patience. Nothing is more frustrating than you turning around 2 hours later. Well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You've got to be patient. You got to take the high road. So here's a good example how to email documentation of retaliation. Okay, let's say you filed EEO charges for sex discrimination. Okay, maybe you're female and a male's doing the same job and he is getting paid more. And it could be the other way around. It could be the other sex too. It doesn't matter. And it could possibly be sex charges, sex discrimination charges, and you file it. Well, you're not allowed to be retaliated against. Of course, you have to have credible evidence to provide to get those charges to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission or to the stateside agencies that handle discrimination. And you can find all this online. So here's a good example. And let's say you filed sex discrimination and all of a sudden you're being harassed, okay, or bullied. Now, in that instance where the EEOC talks about retaliation is illegal, and to you, it probably feels like bullying is the one instance where you can hold somebody accountable for retaliating against you. And what's retaliation? It could be you turning the manager for something discriminatory, and then they turn around and they punish you. They give you extra hours or demeaning work. And that has actually happened to clients of mine. So here's an example I would write. Email. I filed a EEOC on whatever date, and since then I received a bad performance evaluation on this date, but I have consistently met all performance standards. I was also recognized with a cash incentive for my exceptional performance at work. This performance review appears to be retaliatory, and I request a fair performance evaluation of my work. Or I filed an EEOC case on this date, and since then, you transferred me to a less desirable position, state the details. This behavior appears to be retaliatory. I request to be assigned back to my former work position. Well, when you do that, you're doing it by email. You're printing it out immediately. Do not ever send it from work without printing it out immediately. Because if somebody is monitoring the computers, you could end up being fired. And before you could get any of that evidence off the computer, you may not have that evidence if you keep it on your work computer or you keep it home, or the element of surprise. So I've covered about why it's important to document, some examples of how to document. And if you need clarification, you are welcome to reach out to me. I'll be happy to direct you in the right direction, because being resilient is also about boundaries, about standing up for yourself. And it can also be about standing up for others when you see somebody else is being picked on or you believe that they're being discriminated against. And let me end this with, why can't you just count on witnesses? Well, here's the issue. If it's a bad acting supervisor, for example, that person may be afraid to speak up for you because they would lose their health benefit. Maybe their wife or their husband has cancer or bad health. And maybe they're working in the government trying to get their time in so they can retire. That is why a lot of times people are afraid to speak up for you. They're afraid they'll be retaliated against. So follow my tips for documentation. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I will point you in the right direction. I know lots of resources. I'm always here for you. Stay empowered. Every day we get to choose whether we want to be empowered or disempowered. The best thing that you can do in the workplace is document when it is needed. It's vital, and it can also help you succeed in whatever endeavor you're going after. All the best.